Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Johns Hopkins School of Education Doctor of Philosophy Student Panel event. My name is Sion John. I'm the Assistant Director of Admissions here at the Johns Hopkins School of Education. Also here with me, I have my colleague from the Office of Admissions, and she will introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Serena Stewart. I am in the admissions office, and I work with students who are interested in our PhD program. So I'm happy that you are all here with us today.
Thank you, Serena. And presenting today, we also have Dr. Hunter Gelbeck, faculty lead of the PhD program. And we also have three current PhD students, Shui Wang, Lisa Neary, and Juan Cortez. And before we get started, I would like to cover a few housekeeping topics. First, today's webinar is being recorded. We'll be able to share a link to the recorded video within 10 business days. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, so please type your question in the Q&A box and we will answer your questions. And next, I'd like to share the agenda for today's presentation. We'll start with introductions, and then Dr. Gelbeck will go over some tips on how to submit a successful PhD application at SOE. Then you'll have the opportunity to hear directly from our current PhD students. And lastly, we'll leave the floor open for questions at the end. Then moving on to introductions. Dr. Hunter Gelbeck is the faculty lead of the Doctor of Philosophy program at the Johns Hopkins School of Education. Dr. Gelbeck joined SOE in 2019. He received his PhD at Stanford University. His research focuses on improving the social and motivational context of schools. And here on this slide, I would like to introduce our panelists. First, Shui Wang is currently a third-year doctoral student at SOE. Her dissertation topic focuses on meta-analysis of learner autonomy supportive interventions. She received her BA in English Language and Literature at Shantou University in mainland China. She also received her MA in TESOL at the University of Hong Kong. And moving on, we have Lisa Neary. Lisa is currently a fourth-year doctoral student at SOE. Lisa's dissertation topic focuses on exploring the relationship between environmental justice issues and public schooling through the experience of place in urban settings. She received her BA from Colby College in Waterville, Maine, majored in biology and minored in Jewish studies and creative writing. She also received her MS in elementary education from Hunter College in New York City. And lastly, we have Juan Cortez. Juan is currently a fifth-year doctoral student at SOE. Juan's dissertation topic is on early warning indicators in K-12 education. He graduated from Catholic University of America, and prior to entering the PhD program, Juan's professional work focused on research and program evaluation in the K-12 public school systems. First, he also worked in Cleveland Metropolitan School District, and most recently, he also worked in Baltimore County Public Schools. So at this time, I will hand the floor over to Dr. Gelbeck. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming and appreciate the folks joining us online. I suspect that at least a number of you have been to one of the prior sessions before, and just to sort of set a little context, the goal today, the goal of the prior sessions is really sort of like, you know, is the Hopkins PhD program likely to be the right place for you? And today, instead, we're thinking a little bit more that it's probably the right place for you. And instead, we'll focus on like, how do you get your application to in top form? And so I'll set a little bit of context by just talking about the fit of the program with sort of students with different profiles. And then we'll get right into sort of, I'll give a couple bits of like, from my perspective, reading lots of applications, what seems to work well, what seems to work not so well. And then you'll hear from students who actually successfully got in, and we'll hear a little bit more about what they did and decided not to do and some of their strategies. So I'll go through these fairly quickly. If you were at one of the previous sessions, you've heard them already. But things that I think are kind of signature pieces of the Hopkins PhD program. It is an apprenticeship experience. Those can look different for different students, but you're working closely with one or more advisors in almost every single case. So some people sort of work closely with two different people. Sometimes you're sort of getting more of the maybe methods kind of training from one person and more substantive ideas from another person. But at the end of the day, you're almost always working closely with one or a couple of faculty members. Looking for an interdisciplinary approach is sort of the other big thing. So most students sort of emphasize either psychology or sociology, but everyone's getting exposure to both and trying to use those to kind of connect to policy and practice sorts of applications of the research. So it does feel like you are doing research for the real world as opposed to just sort of research for research's sake. So interdisciplinary, you'll get exposure to policy, to sociology, to psychology of education. But oftentimes students will focus on a little bit more of one than the other of those. But at the end of the day, you're being able to sort of leverage the strengths of each of those approaches. Please come on in. Thanks, Terry. Rigorous methodological training. I think that's still very much a calling card. I won't go into depth, but we've talked about open science in past sessions. And so this idea of trying to put you guys in your training at the very cutting edge of what I think is clearly sort of the next wave of like how we determine rigor in educational research. So I think Hopkins is a great place if you're interested in that. If you want to ask me more on the Q&A about the open science stuff, I'm more than happy to talk about it. And so that is kind of this bullet point as well. This idea that, you know, for far too long, we've been the education research community, been getting away with sort of running lots and lots of analyses, and some are just happen to be significant by chance. So we tell a great story about them. So the open science really addresses this problem and some other related problems, just in terms of making research and what you've actually done more transparent. And in terms of an impact on education, both policy and practice by bridging research. So I think there are institutions and programs that you could look at that are totally happy for you to make a contribution to theory. And we're not really clear how or why it might be useful in the real world. Maybe that comes years later. That's really kind of not the flavor you'll get here, right? The idea is, I'm doing this, yes, it's making a contribution to theory, but simultaneously, it's also making a contribution to practice as well. And so I think if we advance the slide a little bit, I'll say a couple more bits. Yeah, so before we go to the next slide, I think one of the huge things in terms of figuring out fit, and this will be my closing comment here, is do you have the right advising sort of composite here for you? And that might be one person who you get to work with really closely. It might be a couple different faculty members that you're getting sort of different things from. But I think at the end of the day, if you're like, God, it seems like a great program, I don't really know who I'd want to work with, you know, you should put some thought into that and get the answer to that first. I think that's going to make a much stronger application. All right, so that's sort of background context. I've said most of that in prior sessions. So on the next slide, I'm going to give you my kind of quick 2 bits on things I feel like have worked well and that we really look for on the admissions side. And so strategy number 1 here is go, and this is follows directly from the previous slide, you know, get to know the faculty you think you want to work with. A lot of people worry or wonder about, should I be, you know, reaching out to them? Is that okay? Yes. And if they don't get back to you, like that's kind of a data point. And It's also something I yell at the faculty about all the time. But I think in general, we're very good about, we're excited to work with students who are promising and exciting and have good ideas. Couple key questions you can ask as you're trying to like reach out to them, send them emails, maybe have a quick meeting. Are they taking students? Sometimes people are going on sabbatical, or they've already got 5 students and can't quite have the bandwidth for another. So that's a kind of a key question. Do they plan on being at the institution moving forward? Every once in a while, faculty leave and take different jobs, new faculty come in. And so knowing both the answer to the sabbatical question and if they're planning to be there over the longer haul, I think are helpful. So, but mostly communicate with key faculty to figure out, is there a good fit with your research, and get them excited about your take on the place where your research interests overlap. All right, next. Don't put all your eggs in one faculty basket. So yes, almost everyone in the program works very closely with a faculty member or a couple faculty members. But if you're like, oh my gosh, it would be great to work with faculty member X, but no one else in the entire school looks interesting at all, that's a data point. You're going to have to take classes with a bunch of different faculty members. So all of them should look at least somewhat interesting to you. And you're going to need a committee of at least 3 people to do your dissertation proposal, 5 people for your dissertation defense, although some people flip that and do 5 and 3. That's a detail for another day. But you do need, at various points and times in the program, you do need a little bit more of a team. And so there should be at least a couple folks who you feel like you have a little bit of overlap with, even if it's really just 1 or 2 people that you're working most closely with. All right, so next, the personal statement. So this is probably what we get the most questions about. And the strongest advice I think I could give you is, a lot of the applications say, I'm really interested in topic X, which is totally fine. But because everyone's saying that, it's not really distinctive. And I think the applications that tend to rise to the top a lot more are folks who will ask an actual research question. So it's not just that you're interested in topic X, but you want to find out the answer to how topic X ... I'll let you fill in the gaps on that one on your application. And I think it's also useful to bear in mind that the sort of like bottom line criteria that we're trying to evaluate is what's your potential as a researcher. So there are lots and lots of different skills and character traits and personality traits that are wonderful, but they may or may not make you a good researcher. And we are mostly interested in those that signal that you were going to be a good, promising researcher. So let me pause there, because I think your time is probably better spent hearing from people who actually got in. And we will have some time at the end for questions. So anything burning real quick before we turn it over to our student panel? All right, great, thank you.
Dr. Galbeck, it looks like there's one more point on this slide on references.
Yes, thank you, good catch. So the other thing that we do get some questions about, sorry, I forgot about this, is, who should I have do my recommendations and what should they be saying? And so disproportionately, you want your recommenders to be able to comment on this question. What's your potential as a researcher? So having more recommendations from people that you've worked with academically in the past is typically going to tend to look stronger. The other thing to think about maybe a little bit is, there are a certain set of things you can say that are going to be really compelling in your personal statement. But then there's another set of things you might want to say that's actually much more compelling if someone else says them about you. And so if you can think through like, all right, who can speak to this skill set that I have, so that, rather than saying like, I'm, really creative when I do data analysis, and so I think I'm really promising. Of course, everyone thinks they're promising, applying to the program. If a recommendation comes in from a professor who says, look, I've seen what this student does in terms of data analysis. It's incredibly creative. I think they've got promise to be even stronger moving forward. Like, that's the kind of thing that maybe sounds a little better coming from someone else than coming from you. You can do a great job of articulating a research question and saying why it's important and why you're enthusiastic about studying it and why your background has prepared you well. But I think thinking about sort of the skill set sorts of things, recommenders who can touch on that, and really focus on other aspects of your potential as a researcher. Good. All right. Let's pivot over to the students now. All right, Shui, do you want to start us out and maybe just give us a little sense of your kind of background and where you came from and how you decided on Hopkins, and then we'll kind of hear a bit of the same from Lisa and Juan.
Hi everyone, my name is Xue. Like Sion introduced, I'm from mainland China. I did my bachelor's degree in there and went to Hong Kong to do a master's in teaching English to speakers of other languages. And I think it's since when I was an undergrad, I was interested in research because I read some journal articles and I thought those are interesting and I wanted to do the same in my context. So I did my first research paper in my third year in my undergrad. And one of my professors, they suggested that I should try publishing that paper. And that's what I did. And eventually the paper got published, and that was a huge encouragement to me and made me more confident that I should pursue this path. So I went on doing a master's degree, and I also published a course paper when I was doing that. And it's also because the professor who was teaching the class encouraged me that the paper I wrote for him is nice, and I can try publishing that. So I think it's from those professors' encouragement and working with them, and also seeing some results made me realize that maybe I am able to do this, and maybe this is for me. So after my master's, I did 2 years of research assistant at a university in Hong Kong, doing qualitative work because I never had those experience. And I think doing the research assistant gave me more time to get my profile ready to apply to PhD programs. Actually, I just searched online what are the programs that are high ranked in the US, and I saw Johns Hopkins. And it's it's a very superficial reason, but that's mainly why I applied to this program. Because I think it's also about the job prospects. I wanted to be a faculty after my PhD, and I always believed in the power of a good name of the school. Of course, individuals, they need their own accomplishments, but I think a good platform is also really important. That's why I decided to apply to here, and luckily I got in.
Awesome. I thought you came here because you knew Lisa and Juan were here. All right, great. Lisa, let's pivot to you. So kind of the same two big questions, like tell us about your personal journey. Why did you decide to pursue a PhD? And then why Hopkins in particular?
Yeah, so when I was in college, as you heard, I went to a school called Colby College, which is up in the forest in Maine. I was a biology major. A lot of my learning was very experiential, either out in the Maine forest. I spent 4 months living in a tent in Namibia as sort of a research tech. So that was like my first sort of dose of research, but also sort of my first dose of understanding how important those kinds of learning opportunities are. I graduated college not knowing what I wanted to do at all. As you might have heard, I was biology major, Jewish studies minor, creative writing. I didn't know. I really love learning. And eventually found my way into working with students. I did a teaching residency program, which is an alternative pathway to get your master's and to get certified as a teacher. Something that struck me in that experience was that it was a cohort model. So there was 12 of us, I believe, and I'm still friends with those folks today. So did that, was teaching for a while. I became aware of another master's program that incorporated these, I'll call it like a field experience during the summer. So I was a middle school science teacher at this time. And the program I was looking at was for, science teachers and educators broadly. There was zookeepers that were actually in this program and other kinds of people related to science and education broadly. But a component of that coursework was sort of developing your own research project with students. So that was the first time that I had done research with humans and not like, I don't know, barley seeds in a lab. And I really loved it. And I think, as I continued to do that work, I don't know when the moment was. And honestly, it might have been my parents, like, hey, like you seem to be really into this. Like, what about exploring research further as a career? So I didn't really know a lot about PhD programs coming into this. I think we're going to get to those questions later on, like what would you do differently? Yeah, honestly, like same kind of process. Looked up good schools of education, whittled it down a bit in terms of where I think I would want to be for the next 4+ years. And, as I started to get to know the Hopkins program a bit more, I was really attracted to the cohort model, having folks with me that are, essential in commiserating and, just having other people. So those were the things that stood out to me in addition to having the Hopkins name. There's so much opportunity here. I think when I met with Hunter, he sort of mentioned that the sky's the limit, which is maybe cheesy, but speaks to like, if you have an idea and you're willing to see it through, that can happen. And yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Great. Juan.
Everyone. So I'd say my journey was probably a little more direct since I'm local. So I'd known about Johns Hopkins. I moved to Maryland in 2014 for work. As had been mentioned previously, I was working, my professional experience was in research and evaluation work in school districts. And that was really where I had the desire or where it was born to continue pursuing my education into a PhD program. So prior to that, I had done a master's in education that focused on learning quantitative methods, so data analysis mainly. And so that was my entry point into these positions in the school districts where I worked. And in the work that I was doing, I saw how important and how impactful just leveraging data and analysis to help school systems make decisions to improve outcomes for students, how important that was. And I just fell in love with it, and then just wanted to learn more and to do more. And through the different involvement in the evaluations that we did and the surveys that we did, just started using and looking for the research literature to support and to use in the work that I was doing, and just thinking to myself, oh, I would really like to do this research work to then help inform what other school districts and places do for their to help improve their student outcomes. And at the same time, had a supervisor that was just very encouraging. She's amazing. Had done her PhD work at Hopkins, not at the School of Ed, but at Hopkins, and suggested I just take a look at the different programs. And so it was a really what I thought was a really great fit. And I'm sure we'll talk more about like the advisor search and things like that. But she encouraged me to apply, and I felt lucky as well to be accepted.
Great. So let's actually stay with you, Juan. And so for these guys who are, trying to think through different programs, but also presumably at each one kind of assess the fit of them. Were there certain things that really helped you to sort of identify, yeah, I think Hopkins is a place that would really work for me? Strategies you can offer these guys in terms of how you sort of thought through that piece of the puzzle?
For sure. So for me, fit came down to thinking about a potential advisor that I would work with closely. So thinking about what I knew my research interests were, and knowing or going through the list of faculty at the university and seeing if there were any professors aligned with that work. That was important to me. It was also important to me to think about the potential impact that I would have in that type of work. So I was just speaking specifically about my situation. I knew that research in K-12 was very important to me. So one of the centers at Johns Hopkins is the Baltimore Education Research Consortium, BERC. They do work specifically targeted to help improve outcomes for families and children in Baltimore. So I knew I wanted to be involved with that. So that resonated with me. So thinking about my potential advisor and the work that I was doing was how I assessed fit.
Great. Lisa and Shui, other thoughts about fit and sort of figuring out that piece of the puzzle, advice you would give them?
I think when I looked at the information about this program, I noticed a word. It's a quantitative intensive program, and that's what I really wanted to learn, because I see a lot of educational research papers. They're quantitative research, and I don't have a very systematic training on that area. So I really want to find a program where I can get those trainings. And another thing I think is what type of, like what Huang said, what type of research you want to do. I did a meta-analysis in my master's, and I was really interested in that and in learning to do it better. And there's a professor at Hopkins at that time who is an expert in that. And he works at a research center, the CRE Center for Research and Reforming Education, which is also a research center at Hopkins. They do meta-analysis. That's their job. They do program evaluation and meta-analysis. So I think I would really love to work with them
I think that's a really important point. So it's not just about substantive fit, but is the person doing the kind of research methodologically that feels like that's what you would be into? And it's always a little bit hard, right? You get here and you're exposed to lots of stuff and you get new ideas. You don't know for sure, but I think to the extent that you can sort of anticipate, I think I'd like to do experimental work, or I think I'd like to work on big data sets, or I think, really qualitative inquiry is really more my thing. Like those are really useful in assessing the fit piece of the puzzle. Lisa, anything to add to that?
I feel like I blended my my first answer with this question a little bit, but I guess the other consideration is sort of like stable and secure funding. I know that there was another program that I was considering, and I guess like I didn't know much, but this sort of raised some red flags of like, oh, the response was, oh, we're so interested in having you, but we do need to sort of like go and piece together some funding for you. So like, I guess, from a very practical perspective, making sure that you have that funding there to do the work you want to do.
And maybe just to add on to that, so a number of programs, the funding is sort of contingent upon you doing things like, yes, you will get funding, but you will need to TA X number of courses, or you'll have to be someone's research assistant. And here it's not tied to anything, just get 4 years of funding. The expectation is you will work closely with your advisor. And often students get a 5th year of funding that they're able to sort of figure out. But that's something to look into as you're thinking through your options at different programs, because I don't know if that's always super transparent. So you might want to ask questions toward that end. We talked briefly about recommendations. Did you guys have anything you wanted to add to what I said? Recommendations about how to go about your recommendations?
Yeah, so while you were talking before, Hunter, something I thought about and was sort of remembering from my own experience is that I had at least one school administrator from the school I was working at write me a recommendation, just because that person knew me well, that's where I had been for the last 3 years. And I gave them some guidance like, oh, maybe you could talk about how you think I handled this, or maybe you can talk about this, like you can give them some guidance on the things that you want them to zoom in on that'll like sort of complement the story that you're trying to convey in your application materials. That was the little addition I had.
That you can nudge your advisors or your recommender.
Yes, you can nudge them to say like, talk about this if you know anything you have to say about that.
That's absolutely right. And maybe the one thing I would add to that is, but a former principal, like, are they going to be able to speak to your promise as a researcher? Some, yes, absolutely. But a lot of them, oh my gosh, Lisa handled this tough classroom management situation really well. I'm not sure that is going to make Lisa a great researcher. So I think both about like, can you steer them to talk about a set of things that do indeed speak to that research potential side of things. Please.
Yeah, I think if it's from more professional lens, you will have someone recommending you from an academic lens, but from a professional lens, they can speak to like your professional development, right? How you've grown in that role, because you will grow here as a student and then as a budding researcher, right? And so that potential about your growth trajectory, I think is something that they could speak to.
Yep, or learning from mistakes, right? Because God knows you're going to make some mistakes once you get here, and even the faculty are still making lots of mistakes. And so some of those kinds of qualities and good illustrations of those, I think, would be helpful. All right, anything else on recommendations, or shall we shift to the personal statement?
I think I had some practical advice. So I'm assuming a lot of people, when they apply to PhD programs, they apply to multiple programs. And I try to not let a single recommender to write too many letters, because I do want to tailor my recommendation letters to each program. And when I reach out to them, I would give them a little bit information about the program I'm applying to, and have the link in the email to the program. And I will give them a list of the points that I want them to talk about me. So like what Lisa said, and yeah, I just try to have a pool of potential recommenders, and have some of them do this school, some of them do that school, not like let one person write too many, because they might just write a very general one if they don't have that much time. You know?
Great. Personal statement, any top tips you guys want to lay out there? I've already given my 2 bits about, ask a research question, not just give a topic.
I would say for me, as starting with as much time as you can early to prepare your thoughts and just get them on paper, and then fleshing them out over time. I think there are some prompts, I believe, on the website that sort of guide your personal statement. So thinking about how you can answer those as well as possible, because you do have a word limit, so you can't just keep going on, but and you'll find that you reach that word limit very quickly. So being as strategic and as giving yourself as much time to focus on answering those prompts or the question that Dr. mentioned, and just proofreading it over and over to see if it makes sense, if it flows the way you want to, if it's telling the story that you want to, then potentially consider getting some feedback on your personal statement.
Yeah, this was sort of a fun exercise for me. I went back and I read my personal statement before this session, and I think I maybe unknowingly was doing what Hunter said. I sort of identified a problem that I had been noticing, and I addressed it from different angles, like what I was experiencing in the classroom, things that I had read, and I sort of walked through a research project that I had done. And then I think the other thing that I brought up is what, in addition to why I would be a good researcher, what I would then do with that knowledge. What would I do with a PhD? What was the next step after that? And of course that might change, but where are you thinking that's going to take you in this moment? And then also mention, showing that you've done your research on Hopkins, and talking through potential advisors is something that I did in mine. I don't know if that's sort of required, but yeah, seeing it through, like what happens after the PhD, I guess is the additional bullet.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really helpful one from someone who reads these. I think definitely, yes, don't be subtle, drop people's names of who you think you want to work with, and tell us, what you think the big picture grand plan is, why you need that PhD sort of across your career. Great. Anything you want to add?
Yes, I remember the personal statement for this program, because among all the programs I've applied to, this one has the least word limit. It's 750 when I applied.
We're very generous on the stipend. on the word limit.
Yes, so that made it really hard for me, because I tend to elaborate on the achievement that I've had in the past. But when I later on I realized that it's not like you shouldn't waste time repeating what people can see from your CV. And I think telling a story is really important, because if you're just listing things, people, I don't know how many applications they read, they might get, well, it won't make a strong impression to them. But if it's a good story with a good research question, I think that will make it stand out.
All right. Not that you guys ever make any mistakes, but if there were one or two things in the application process that you could go back and do differently, because you've now been here several years, you kind of know how the program works, you know a lot of details these folks don't know. What would you coach your younger self to do differently? Or are you indeed all perfect?
It's hard to say because we were accepted.
It worked. Yeah. Fair enough.
I mean, oh, sorry. Yeah, I think, and we've sort of already covered this, but I was not, I didn't have a strong direction or a strong preference for methods. And you know, not that you necessarily need to know, you'll be exposed to lots of different methods through your coursework, but I think something that I could have done better was really like at least paying attention to like qualitative versus quantitative. And like when I looked up the different, you know, researchers here, I guess I didn't understand that I could potentially be working with multiple people. So, and you know, it worked out for me in the end. I've worked with a handful of folks here at School of Education, but I guess, yeah, just, you know, with a lens of research methods, looking through what different projects are happening at within the school would be helpful.
Yeah, and I'll just super quick before you go, Shui. Knowing what projects faculty members have going on, I think is a strong signal of, in much more concrete terms, the flavor of the kind of research that you would be doing, right? So there'll be like, I got such and such grant, here's the title, and here's a little abstract. That gives you a pretty clear sense of like, oh, I imagine they're doing this kind of work. They're often interviewing students, or, you know, they're using natural language processing to mine big data sets, qualitative data. You know, those kinds of things I think are really helpful to find out about. So sorry, go ahead.
I didn't reach out to any faculty members before I applied. I think I should have reached out because I think I was only thinking it wouldn't make a difference, and that if people are really interested in my profile, I would get in eventually, and reaching out is not the most important part of my application. But after hearing what people have been saying, I think it is important because practically you do need to at least know if they are looking to work with students. Because if they're not taking students and you put their name on your application, you sort of like wasted a spot. And I think I kind of made up for it after the interview. I sent one of the professors who interviewed me, I sent them both a thank you email, and in that email I followed up on one of the things we discussed in the interview, and just went into a little detail on that question. So I think that kind of, I hope that helped me make up for it. But if you haven't reached out, I recommend you do and not make the same mistakes that I made.
Good. Any last bits that you felt like you wanted to get into the conversation, or should we go ahead and turn it over to questions at this point? I'm sure looks like there are a handful of folks online, and we've got some folks here. So any last bits that you feel like would be useful for these folks?
You can also reach out to PhD students if that feels like a little less scary. You know, I think we're all on the website and our bios and interests are there.
Yeah, just piggybacking off
Yeah.
of that. So I think if you do reach out to a faculty member and you think this person might be a good fit, you know, asking them, is it okay if I talk to one of your students to sort of assess, what potentially working with that faculty member might be like, is a possibility as well.
Great. Are there online questions at this point?
Yes, we do have 7 questions, and I think Sian will go ahead and facilitate that for us.
Thanks, Raina. So we have 7 questions. The first one is, how important is the GRE? What are the expected scores for admitted candidates?
So I'll give one take on that, which is, it's very much a holistic process. So there's not some set score we can give you, like make sure you hit X. And if you don't, don't even bother applying. It's not even remotely that cut and dry. If you have great scores, that's a strong signal of one small thing among many that we're looking for. And then conversely, if you have weak scores, that's one small thing among many that we're looking for. And so think about compensatory elements all the way up and down the line between your recommendations, your scores, your undergraduate GPA. Master's GPAs honestly don't fluctuate too much, so there's kind of less information there. But knowing what master's program you came from is often helpful. Recommendations, personal statement, but so much of it is about fit. I mean, most of the time we could fill up our incoming class 4 or 5 times over with equally qualified people, but not everyone is an equally good fit for our faculty and vice versa. So.
All right, thank you, Dr. Galbeck. The next question we have from Alexandra is, can a current faculty member write a letter of recommendation for me?
Yeah, for sure. They're gonna recuse themselves from the admissions sort of voting and process. But there's not that many people on our admissions committee anyway. So typically it's good. We generally pay attention in a different way to recommendations that are coming from someone who we know personally. And that holds whether it's a Hopkins faculty member or someone we just happen to know who's out in the field, like a researcher who I happen to know at some other institution. I can kind of hear their voice. It's their talking through the recommendation, and so it sort of lands in a stronger way usually.
Another question from Alexandra is, are applicants expected to be already published or have spent some time as a research assistant before submitting an application? If not expected to, does it help?
Oh, it certainly helps. I think again, the bottom line that we're sort of looking for is what's your potential as a researcher. And if you've got a publication, well, that certainly speaks in a very concrete way to your potential as a researcher.
Thank you, Dr. Galbeck. Another GRE related question. What is the minimal GRE score? And if I have a relatively low GRE score, but a strong background in research in academia, will JHU consider me?
I don't know that I really have anything to add over and above the previous answer to the other GRE question. So compensatory merit, sliding scale, no hard cutoffs, holistic view of the candidates.
Moving on to the next question, is there an interview portion of the application process?
Yeah, I mean, you guys all interviewed. Do you want to say a bit about what that was like?
Sorry. So there were I think 2 or 3 faculty members that were very familiar with my application and just had questions. So it didn't feel like an interview. It felt more like a conversation with faculty members and just them wanting to know about my research interests and my experience, my background. So I thought it went well.
And Joy, you didn't reach out to faculty members beforehand, so this interview is sort of your first chance getting to interact a little bit.
Yes, before the interview, I reached out to Raven and asking who will be interviewing me, and she gave me the name. Thank you. And those are the same names that I put on my application. So I did some research on each of them and their published works, and some I also went to YouTube to see if they have done any like talks at any events. And I think those helped me a lot because I didn't reach out and talk to them before, but having known them a little better before I actually talked to them made me less nervous, but I was still nervous, and there's a time difference, so it was late night for me. Oh, I was wearing the same sweatshirt because I heard blue like calms you down. I think it went well. I did have some questions I couldn't understand. I couldn't answer on the spot, but I was just honest saying I didn't know much about it, but I will do more research. I think, like Juan said, treating it as more like a conversation is better than treating it like an interview. And I think that's what they want as well.
Yeah, I was also on YouTube before my interview, but mostly just looking up like what's a PhD interview like. There's so many good resources online for like kinds of questions and things you can practice with. I have heard that if you receive the opportunity to interview, that's a very good sign, right? So maybe that can help you relax, like, oh, they're very interested in me. I have some things to say and I have some things to talk about. And yeah, it's like a conversation. I had Hunter in my interview and it was a good time.
Maybe the one other thing I'll add, and then we may have some more questions to get to. I think there's a sense in which if you be yourself, you'll get a better read on if it's a fit. And then if you be yourself and you don't get in, well, maybe that's a blessing in disguise. So by the interview stage, it's much more of a two-way street. So you may walk away from the interview thinking like, ooh, I don't actually know if I could spend 4 or 5 years working with these 2 or 3 people. And so anyway, I think the point being, don't forget that it's a two-way street, and the fit needs to be there for you as well as on the faculty side.
Thank you, everyone. The next question we have is related to stipend. So one, how does a stipend work? What is the stipend? And then someone is also asking any follow-up question. International students, are they funded?
Yes, international students are funded. Currently, the stipend is $30,000 per year, and then $1,000 for sort of research related expenses. So usually that's like travel to a conference kind of thing. In the interest of being fully transparent, there is a negotiation happening at the university level with a union. And so this could theoretically change. I think that's pretty much all that I'm at liberty to say. But for now, it is $30,000 a year. And it just, and tuition is fully covered, and healthcare and vision and dental.
Yes.
Did I miss anything, Sion?
No, I think you covered everything. Perfect. The next question we have is, other programs that I visited required skills surrounding coding to use in a statistical analysis. Does your program have skills such as coding that it wants, but may not necessarily require?
You guys want to speak to what coding you have learned since you've been here?
Sure, yeah, I had 0 coding experience before starting here, so I'll just wanted to say that, but yeah, we used statistical software, usually Stata. There's also folks that use R. You're an R person, right? Are both of you R people? Okay, so you can talk more about that.
Yeah, I also had zero coding experience before coming here. I think it depends on which cohort you're in. Some cohorts, they take courses in Stata more, others take courses in R more. I took all my statistical courses in Stata, but because I work with the research center that I mentioned earlier, they work on meta-analysis and they do those work in R. That's how I learned R as well. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I had some coding experience prior to the program. I don't think that's something that I necessarily mentioned in my application, so I don't think that was a component that helped me to get accepted, but it is something that just helped me be a little bit more prepared for that experience, because you will need to do some statistical coding in whatever program it is, whether it's Stata or it's R. I will say that one of the, I don't know if I would say best decisions, but for sure it has been a helpful decision, was to learn a new program when I started. So I learned R. I wasn't familiar at all with it, and it has a very steep learning curve. But there were many other people who were familiar with R in the school, so I could rely on them as a resource, and now it's the main program that I use. So I will say it gave me a good opportunity to learn a new program.
And there's a course really dedicated to help you figuring out, like, how do you manage a data set? How do you set up your code? And it is not like high level theory. It is like nuts and bolts. How do you get the coding done? How do you organize the data set? How do you merge it with another data set? So a course I desperately wish I had had in my graduate program, but I had to learn all that stuff the hard way. Sion, do we have time for like one more question?
We do. The next question is, what are some qualities that would be good to focus on to demonstrate research abilities?
I'll say a few things. So rather than qualities, like, experiences are really good. So the published paper is one example, but having conducted a research study, even if it doesn't get published, like, that is helpful to know that you've been through that process. Conference presentations are another good signal. Knowing some coding is great. Having done data collections, having done data analysis, even having done a literature review. All those things are sort of part of the bigger research picture, and the more and more impressive of those that you can sort of point to that you've already done in the past, I think are really helpful. Yeah, qualities might be one of these things where it's maybe a little bit better for the for your recommenders to kind of talk through some of those. But I think, you know, things like the ability to refine a research question, so that it's really asking the thing that is most important, or that is theoretically interesting and practically important. Those are great. You know, long list of qualities that could be helpful, but I think I would, in your own application, I think the thing you can probably focus on the most is the experiences you've had that signal research potential. And then per Lisa's recommendation, I think if you could nudge a recommender to speak specifically toward this quality or that quality that you think you have that suggests a very promising researcher, that would be great too. Sion, should we wrap up, or?
Yeah. Does anyone in the room have a question? Yeah, go ahead.
Is it possible to observe or the program while it's before enrolling?
Like, come sit in on a class?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can make that happen, sure. Raven's probably the best person to coordinate with, because she'll know the schedule of the classes, and then we'll just reach out and make sure it's okay with the instructor. But I think other folks have, did you do that? No. Yeah, no. I think Claire from the more recent cohort did that. She was in my class at one point. Anyway, yes, fine, easy to do, and a great idea.
I'm just curious, anything that you have found to be surprising as you are like through the process, near the end of the process that you didn't think of or you didn't realize when you were doing your application or applying to the program? I'm sure there's many, but anything that really sticks out about like, man, I wish I knew this.
Like about the PhD experience, about the, okay, it's a lot of reading. I think there's a lot, so I started in 2020, the fall of 2020, so there was a lot of surprises and a lot of things that were different about my experience. Yeah, but a lot of reading.
Is full time. So one of the things that I had to adjust to was from being someone who would get up and go to a professional work environment every day to now being a student. Even though I had many prior experiences being a student, this was, you know, full-time student. And I guess some people do treat it like a job, so they will just focus on that. But you know, you're gonna be, like Lisa said, you're gonna be doing a lot of reading. So just staying organized with your classes. I think something that is more in the weeds is like, we'll need to find the reference manager, right? That will help you keep track of all the articles and things that you're reading, right? So things like that I wasn't aware of.
I was just wondering, I heard that being an RA and a TA are not like essentially linked to the stipend, but are there experiences that you've had through this program besides the coursework that has, you know, through Johns Hopkins that have been, you know, extremely beneficial or you valued through this process?
So I'll just quickly say, you are on the hook for having two TAing experiences.
Okay.
Because we feel like even if you go off and are like in an AIR, American Institutes for Research, or WestEd, those kinds of roles where you're like just a researcher, you still have to explain your findings and stuff. You have to teach people about what you learned all the time. So as part of your training, we do require 2 rounds of, we call it TA experience, but you know, people have done that where it's a small program, so it can really tailor to your needs and interests in trying to figure out what's a good fit. And then the research experience is really much more how you, in tandem with your advisor, figure out how you want to navigate that. And again, small program, a lot of individualized attention. So, okay, you've had XYZ things in your background. Well, so you don't need to do Y over again. Let's focus on
Flexible.
yeah. So it's very much tailored, I think, is the experience. It's the experience we're striving for. Do you guys feel like we're getting there?
And also if you, I think there are a lot of RA opportunities in the program. So if you're interested in exploring other research interests, there are opportunities to work with other professors on different projects. And I've done that. And I realized what I liked, what I didn't like. So you can just, yeah, it's an exploration.
Something just to add, I think you'll realize at some point there are a lot of them. And it's important to realize that you can say no to opportunities as well, that you don't have to say yes to every opportunity that comes across your desk.
Yeah, I feel that, but it is a useful opportunity to experience different labs workflows and how they organize things and run things. So there's plenty of opportunity for research jobs.
Yeah, and some of them are paid.
Yes.
Some, not all, right?
Well, the ones that I worked on, they are paid,
Okay.
but yeah.
It's just a follow-up. Are they typically in Johns Hopkins or are they, oh, okay, so. Awesome. Well, we're gonna wrap it up for today, but thank you all so much for being here in person and online. Our contact information is up there, so you'll see my contact information. Again, I'm Serena Stewart. I work specifically with students who are working to apply to the PhD program. So if you have any questions about the admissions process, please feel free to reach out to me. And then right behind me is Raven. Her contact information is up there as well. She is going to be your first line of contacting the program. So thanks so much for being here, and we appreciate the time that you took to be with us. We hope that we will see your application soon.
All right, thanks, everyone.